Hello friends! Welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if you are new. Happy to have you here. Oh my gosh. Happy 2025. It has finally arrived. The new year is here and that means it's time to talk down to business. We're gonna get into it. We are gonna talk about my favorite books of 2024. The best of the best. I will have on screen here right now my honorable mentions. These are the books that got either 4 or 4.5 stars. I'm gonna be really honest, not my best reading year. I did not come away with a lot of 5 stars, let alone good quality 5 stars that made me go, these are new favorites of all time, these are books that I'm going to think about forever and ever, so on and so forth. I didn't have a lot of those. Making my top 10 was truly so difficult. I am pretty confident in most of these, but there were a couple where I was just like, is this though? And unfortunately, because of my PC breaking for 2 weeks in December and work stuff happening and then traveling for 2 weeks and taking time away from life, then I was not able to revisit some of the books that I thought might be 5 stars but were kind of on the fence. So this is not like the definitive list, but this is, I'm pretty sure, is the list. But I thought, since we're going to be discussing some of my favorite books, I thought it would be fun to add a little twist, a little spin, give this video a little more oomph to talk about, and we're going to also look at the 1-star reviews of my top 10 favorite books. I will do the same with my worst. I will read off a couple 5-star reviews of books that I thought were hot garbage, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. We're gonna laugh. It's gonna be great. I think doing this not only makes it fun, but also reminds people that everybody has different opinions, and it's totally okay if we disagree on books, and it's fun to laugh at other people's potential reviews, whether positive or negative, of something we enjoy. And so, with quick disclaimer that we don't really need to get into because you've all heard it before, let's jump in with my number 10. My first favorite of the year was actually the second book that I read in 2024. The first review that I saw that was 1 star was from Riley here on YouTube, which is, you know, more fun, right? And she says, "If I'm Not Like Other Girls" was a book, and the other review I have is Unhinged in a bad way. And the third one, entire book felt somewhere between a shitty gag joke and those you cringe, you lose videos, which, okay. My final review that I picked out was not a slay, but an A for me, which, you know, everybody to each their own. The book in question is Mayfly, which I find so funny. This is often pitched to be American Psycho, but for the girlies. It's got a feminine twist. You've got a female main character who's also, maybe by chance, a serial killer. Who knows? Who's also, at a time, working in Disneyland as one of the princesses, which I just love that. It gives Disney adults some horror, you know? Mayfly is following a young girl named Maeve, and she, you know, life is unusual for Maeve. I understand where people think Maeve can be a pick-me girl and see her as not like the other girls because she's so different. She's on the outskirts. But this just had some humor and charm. I really enjoyed this. I have read CJ Leeds' 2024 release and it didn't hit for me. So it's interesting to see like a success of a book to this magnitude. But seeing a larger novel come out later that has a lot more going on in it just didn't hit for me, and I really wish that it did. But Mayfly really worked. I love this creepy cover. I love the premise of this serial killer girl. This also has a little bit of a romance in it that I eat up, that I love. I was absolutely obsessed with it. I was almost in tears by the end of the book. It just really worked for me in ways that I can't fully explain. It's obviously not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it worked for me, and I don't know. Maybe I need to revisit it. There's a few scenes that have just stuck with me. Truly stuck with me. Any mouse scene, curling iron wand scene, all these things have really just stuck with me through time and time. I had the honor later this year, I think in October, being on Library Dwellers reading sprints where Aaliyah, Richie, and I were reading stuff, hanging out, and Richie was reading this. And being able to see their reactions to the things that were happening and being able to catch it live time as somebody was reading this for the first time was truly one of my favorite things to happen this year. It was so much fun. I was also lucky to be asked by Aaliyah to be on her book club. I think we read this in January for the first month of her book club, so it was really fun to just be able to chat about this book as well. Definitely one that I want to revisit and read again because I feel like as time has passed, as 260 books have been read for a whole year, I definitely feel like I have forgotten a little bit of its charm. Like I remember stuff, but I want to remember, you know, the more tender things too. But yeah, definitely a good book. I really enjoyed it. And if that's my number 10, we're only in for a ride from here, right? My next book comes in with a 1-star review. Yapperson manages to say nothing for 277 pages. And I get it. I understand. The next review says, how did this movie get a cult following? Let's be serious. And the final one, terrible movie script, terrible book. I can't lie and say that I don't get what those reviews are saying. Horror movie by Paul Tremblay somehow knocked my socks off and made me fall in love with this book. I get those poor reviews that are saying that this book is nothing, a big old nothing burger. This is all about this singular man who has basically outlived the rest of his cast for this indie horror movie that had just like a lot of weird stuff going on, and he is telling the story and trying to revive the movie to get somebody to buy it, to make it actually get filmed, because the film was never fully produced, never was released, and only I think 2 or 3 small clips of the movie came out and the internet ate it up. Now when people are critiquing that this terrible movie script became a cult classic, the internet is a weird place, and I can't pretend that I understand it. Like, Reddit, creepypasta, like, those types of places would eat something like this up. Is it maybe a cult classic to the big scale that we're thinking? Probably not. But I can see the appeal, and I can see this actually happening, especially, like, when the internet was becoming what it was, rather than what it is to this current day. But when YouTube was up and coming, and you would watch a car commercial and something would scare you, jump out at you. My stepdad loved to fool that on me and my sister. So I can kind of see this happening back in like the early 2010s to early 2000s maybe. For sure could happen. But I like this. Is it pretentious? Sure. Is it slow and meandering? Sure. Is the audiobook production good? Yes. And I do think that does help a little bit. This is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition. I don't know if it was worth $30, but it was a good time. I really like that it's got that mixed media format. You're going from the room, reading the script together, and having, like, the mess-ups and so on and so forth, and, like, hearing paper shuffle. I like that. I enjoyed our character for who he was. And this book really has the end payoff. I can understand why people would DNF this and not want to give it the time, because it is a little bit slow and boring, as not a whole lot is really going on. You're kind of just seeing the makings of the movie and like learning about what was happening, which I did think was interesting enough, obviously, since I kept reading. But once you get to the end, it's really the whole payoff. It kind of reminds me of the reading experience for My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones, because that too had a very slow burn payoff towards the end, where it's like, yeah, there's a lot here and it's good, but it's not fantastic, and a lot of people don't make it the 400 pages in. But once you hit that sweet spot where like it goes off the rails, it's so enjoyable. I will give a slight warning that there's a character in here with some trigger warning suicide tendencies or ideation, and that did kind of mess with my head a little bit. I definitely was in like a dark place a day or two after reading this, just because I wasn't expecting how subtle it was, and although it is beautiful and nice in some ways, it definitely made me go, oh wait, am I okay? Am I good? But I'm good. By the end, this did make it into my top 10, so I really did enjoy this, even though warning going into it, but I had fun. Book number 3. I don't have any reviews to read for this one, just because it's not a super well read book. It's not like well known book. It's not got a lot of reviews, but I think that I could see critiques for this existing, absolutely. The book I'm talking about is Underneath by Lily Wong. This was recommended by Richie, who had previously read it, and we decided, Leah invited me and Richie to have a discussion on it and read it for the 4B's book club on the Library Dwellers channel. And so we read it and talked about it, and it's maybe one of my favorite book discussions I've had in a really long time. I know that this is best books of the year. Not like this is going to be on a lot of people's best, so I don't think a lot of people will be picking this up, and I don't recommend a lot of people necessarily pick this up. Look into it, read the trigger warnings. I have a good read review for it that kind of talks more about everything in a little bit more depth. You can check out the live show and kind of get a feel for things, but this is based on true crime, and it's heavy and difficult to read. It's not easy. It's incredibly layered. There's so much packed into this story. It is repetitive. There are parts that are really drawn out. This is following the ghost of a girl who is telling kind of the story of her mom, who her and her siblings, and I don't know how to explain it. It's one of those things that like objectively the writing was really good. I think that Lily Wong took this not super known true story and like gave it so much more life. A lot of it is fiction. It's not all reality. And so there's a lot of like nuanced conversation of morality and ethics of writing a book such as this, and there's a lot to it. But the experience that I had reading it was enjoyable and was like a 4-star. But having that discussion around it and really diving in to the topics of it for so long and just being able to really digest the story and everything in it really made it a well-rounded time for me. And it ended up being 4.5 stars. I couldn't in my right mind give it just like a full hearty 5 stars, but I do think I gave it 5 on Goodreads with a 4.5 review talking about everything with trigger warnings and so on and so forth. But I do think this is a good story. I think that there are certain people who will eat this up and really enjoy it. I bought a copy to lend to my mom so that she could read it because she loves true crime, and we're not always going to have nuanced conversations about like the ethics of things, and she's just going to enjoy things that she enjoys. So we're just going to like let her live her little life. But I do think it was fascinating. There's a lot there. We're not going to get into all of it. We're going to bring back some levity to this. But yeah, I did really enjoy reading Underneath. So, okay, next review for the next book, I don't have a physical copy of. I definitely need to get one. But Sarah said, 1 star, I feel like I must have read a different book than other reviewers. This was such a slow book, with no twists and just a general eerie vibe. The next one is a little bit longer. It says, this book is not a horror story. It is just the usual lesbian romance under a cover with a supernatural-ish phenomenon. The self-pity of these characters all the way was true torture. The missed opportunity with the plot twists are annoying and tiring. This is a sensational drama about loss and homosexuality. Even the family dynamics don't save it. Save your time and don't read this unless you love a psychodrama. Oh my gosh, that's like a little harsh. The next one from Jennifer says, I don't like ghosts. I didn't understand this book or the point of it or why anyone would believe that, so I don't know why I even read it. And the final one is for... For Pete's sakes, lady, just get a good therapist. Which, you know, fair, funny, love it. I love reading 1-star reviews. There is just something joyous about what people have to say. Okay, I'm going to preface some of these reviews with stating that reading a book in a very broad genre such as horror sometimes can be misleading. Sometimes you think you're getting a paranormal, spooky, scary horror book. And sometimes you're getting a grief-filled trauma story under supernatural pretense. And it is still horror. The book in question is The Haunting of Velkwood. I rather enjoyed this. I thought it was a beautiful story. I listened to the audiobook. I was gripped and engaged. I thought it was just very touching but sweet. The payoff really worked for me. This is all about a street, a neighborhood, maybe a cul-de-sac, I don't fully remember, but part of a street that has been completely blocked off. There was some weird phenomenon that basically has trapped everybody inside. And nobody can go in, nobody can come out, but these 3 girls who were able to leave at one point, I think when they were going off to college, they were able to escape this before weird stuff was really going down, and they're the only ones that can return. And so, of course, scientists, journalists of the sort are trying to experience what's going on and learn more about it and do studies on it because it's a weird phenomenon. And so our main character decides to go back. And this book does have some romance in it, which I did enjoy, but I don't think that's really the focus of the story. I don't think that's really what it's trying to discuss. I really loved I don't want to spoil anything, but I really loved the reveals of what's going on in this town and what it means to the different people. It's also just like very eerie seeing your family just be in a time loop of never really going off to work, just sitting in the car all day and then coming back into the house. And it's just weird. And like the loss of something that's still there. I don't know. It was a beautiful story. I really enjoyed it. I really do highly recommend it. I think a lot of people can enjoy it. It's not one of those horror books that, like horror movie. I don't know if I'd widely recommend it because I don't think it's going to fit every audience, but I think The Haunting of Velkwood can work for a lot of people, and I really, really enjoyed it. I was touched by the end. I really liked it. On to the next, we have a 1-star review says, I should have given up on this. First person narration of I will stab, break, rip out, blah blah. I'm so fierce and stabby was annoying and dislikable. I love first person, especially for fantasy. Romance was unbelievable. they went from being cold to her literally hugging him and being in love. Okay, no. This was far too long, and the plot was undeveloped and lumpy. Not lumpy. The plot was underdeveloped and jumpy. I was going to give this 2 stars for potential, but I really didn't enjoy this, and it was a chore to finish. Well, it's disappointing when people don't love the books that you like, which is fine, and not everyone's gonna have the same experience, but The Jasad Heir by Sarah Hesham. I might be saying Jasad wrong, and if I am, I do apologize, but this was an Illumicrate pick, I think last year, 2023, and I rather enjoyed this. It was in the romantasy category for Goodreads Choice Awards, which I don't fully agree with. I can understand why people could pick this out as a romantasy. It's got romance in it for sure. I do think that it focuses a bit more on the fantasy and political intrigue and like what's going on, but it is also like kind of an enemies to lovers romance and slow burn, so like I can see both arguments. I rather enjoyed this. In this we're following Sylvia, and Sylvia lives in a small town minding her own business. She's got a little found family, and it's just like simple living, does the work that she needs to do to survive, helps out, all good things. But then she gets discovered for having some magical abilities, which is outlawed, of course. You can't have powers in fantasy worlds. So she kind of goes on the run. She starts working with the enemy and is training and becomes, I think she's meant to be like a champion. It has been a little while since I've read this, but I believe that she's becoming a champion for a set of trials that are happening, and we decide, and by the title you can discern what happens along the way. I really enjoyed the found family aspects to the story. I really liked the lore and the world and history. It's got Egyptian mythology tied into it from my understanding, and overall I really liked this. I had a lot of fun with it. I was eating it up. I read this in a single sitting. I had a really good time, and I do recommend this. I think a lot of people could enjoy it. By the time that I had finished it, I was scouring the internet for any crumbs of word on the second book, which it does seem like we will be getting in 2025. So I will probably do a reread of this just so that it's fresh in my mind, since it is a bit chunkier. This is 480 pages, so I definitely want to revisit this world and remember everything before going into the second book. But I had a blast with this. I really loved it. It's got everything that I enjoy in stories. So also beautiful cover. So I do recommend this. I think a lot of people can get enjoyment out of this. It does read more YA than adult, so depending on where you land on that. I obviously enjoy a lot of YA. Okay, this next one. These are gonna be fun. Okay. Sarah says, this is by far the worst thing I've ever read. How have people been giving this good reviews? Have they lost their mind? Do they have severe cataracts? Are they being held at gunpoint? There are professionals that can help y'all, whatever the reason. My therapist is going to be tired of me when I inevitably rant about complete and utter monstrosity of a book next week. Damn, it's not that bad. Like, it's kind of nice. Next one, what the f*** did I just read? Are y'all okay? The people giving this 5 stars and praising this book are sick in the head. It was so ridiculous, I couldn't help but laugh from pure disgust. A woman... This one's my favorite, and it is like mild spoilers, so I do apologize, but you've seen it around on BookTube a lot, so like, a woman and her pet evil squid / boyfriend stay in the house for 3 days. It's so funny. The book in question is The Haar by David Sodergren. I loved it. This is a short novella. Maybe splatterpunk horror? I'm not really sure what the gauge of, like, extreme horror versus just, like, normal horror is anymore. Like, I've read Mayfly and The Haar, and they're both in my top 10, so, like, I don't know what this says about me. I didn't think it was that gruesome or gory. I thought this had everything that it needed. It was a fun time. I thought Muriel was a great character to follow. We are in a small, Scottish, like, coastal village where billionaire Americans are buying up the land and forcing people out, and Miriam is standing her ground. She says, no way, Jose, we are staying here, as people keep leaving and taking the money. And one foggy night, from the haar, which is actually a real word apparently and not just a title, from the haar comes a creature that, you know, moves the plot forward, if you will. I really enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun. It took me on an emotional ride that I was not expecting. The ending especially just really It really worked for me. It was so sweet and touching. Obviously, there's like a lot of gore and death going on at the same time, but it really worked for me. I was touched. I felt emotions. I really cared for these characters. Muriel is probably one of my favorite characters from this entire year. Like, she has really stuck with me. She just felt so real and true. I really did enjoy this. I don't know if like I widely recommend it to everybody, just because it does have a bit more gruesome deaths going on. But if you don't mind a little novella with some moments that you might need to turn away from at times, I think this is a really sweet, touching story. So, The Heart. I liked it a lot. Okay, the next I also don't have a physical copy of. I don't think there is one, at least not yet. But let's read what the people have to say. Mara rated it 1 star and said, and quoted, "I would rather love a coward than mourn a legend," and says that's boring. And I think that's like the perfect setup for any fantasy, any romance. So wrong, but that's okay. The next one says, "Saw a review that said go into this blind, and that was the worst possible advice you could have given." I disagree. I do think this is a story you should go blind into. I think that you should not know a whole lot just because it's really short. The next and final one says, "Not a fan of this short story. Medieval setting? This one was a love story about war and death. Interesting." The story in question is Alex E. Harrow's short story, The Six Deaths of the Saint. The fact that this made my top 5 is baffling to me. I don't know how it did it. I don't know how to talk about it. It's literally so short. It's like, I want to say like 26 pages or something. This is a part of the Amazon exclusives, where there was maybe like 6 or 8 or something authors that came and each wrote a short story and went in this collection, and they're available on Kindle Unlimited and Audible. And so, of course, I picked up the one that everybody had been raving about previous years, saying like, The Six Deaths of the Saint is so good. And I said, bet. And I picked it up. And it started kind of slow, and I was like, I don't think I get it. I'm not sure what the hype is about. And then, as the story kept going on this cycle, things started to click in my head, and before I know it, the pages were done, and I felt like crying. It just really touched me in a weird way, and apparently we're going to be getting a full-length novel of this because it was so loved. And if that's true, and I don't know if it is, but if it's true, I'm very excited. Do I know if this will make a good full-length novel? No, I'm not sure, but I am intrigued, and I really, really like this. For how short this was, it was punchy, it hit me in the feels, it gave me so much to think about and contemplate that I was genuinely just like sitting there for a while like, wow, she did that. That happened. This happened. This book, truly an amazing thing. Incredible. I really weirdly enjoyed it. I don't know what else to say. I don't know how to tell you what this book is about. So you're gonna have to just trust me and go read it for yourselves. As we move on to the next reviews, M rated this book 1 star and stated, "What if someone wrote Vespertine/Caraval alternate universe where all of the characters were inexplicitly named after trees? This is what." I love Caraval. If we've learned anything from this channel of mine, is that I am a sucker for the Caraval book. It's one of my favorites. It got me back into reading. It's just got that whimsy Venice feel that I really loved and enjoyed. Sorry about it. And Vespertine is on my shelves. It's living up there. Haven't read it yet, but now I feel like I must read it soon. Next one says, way overhyped. It was boring, confusing, and very lackluster. The whole premise of collecting cards reminds me of Pokemon. Gotta catch 'em all. This book gave me gothic Dr. Seuss vibes. Yeah, the rhymes slapped, and the mist is cool, and it's gothic and dark fairy tale. What do you want? Yeah, catch the cards. It's fun. I love card magic. I'm a sucker for card magic. Okay, next review. I really must have read a completely different book from everyone else. Must have. I wanted to love this so bad. And I have been there time and time again, especially with hyped popular books where you're like, everyone loves it. This is going to be my one, guaranteed 5 stars, and it doesn't work for you. And I was so scared that that's exactly what would happen to me with One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I didn't think I was going to like this at all. I was nervous. I'd heard so many different mixed reviews of people who love it and people who really don't like it. And just not knowing where I was going to land, not knowing what I was going to expect from it. I knew a few things about this one and the second book, and my expectations were misled from what everyone had told me prior. And this, we are following Elspeth, who has been infected with this illness that's kind of triggered from the mist, which happened from lore 500 years ago. Elspeth is one of the infected and therefore is supposed to be taken to the king and executed for being ill and having some type of magical ability, because that ain't allowed here. Magic is outlawed in fantasy. The only magic allowed in this world are from a deck of cards. And like I said, I love card magic. It's so good. And so Elspeth crosses paths with a Raven Ewe, who is the king's nephew, I believe, and they kind of spark up a agreement to help each other and work together towards their different goals. And I just really enjoyed Elspeth. There is so many cool card magics that just, I love the ability of them. Because of Elsa's infection, she has a nightmare inside her little head, so I really like the trope, I guess, of having like somebody talk in your head. I think that it's quite cool. I think finding out why the nightmare is in her head is super dope. I just really enjoyed the world, the lore building, like everything that has to do with the past and history repeating itself. I thought it was just very cool. The atmosphere and setting is phenomenal. If you like books because of the vibes, this is a vibes heavy book. It's definitely got the atmosphere ready for you. It's just, love it. So yeah, I actually really enjoyed this way more than I thought I would. I went into it thinking this isn't going to be romantasy. It's really just like a fantasy with a little bit of romance. But Elspeth and Raven do spend a lot of time on page together, and it is a lot of them kind of just like flirting and getting to know each other and like having a lot of banter that makes the reader swoon a little bit. So it definitely has a lot going on in it, and I think a lot of people you can understand why everybody enjoys this, and I'm so thankful that I also enjoyed it. Since reading this, I have finished the duology. Was one of my like first few books from the year of 2025, and I enjoyed it. It's not quite as good, won't be in my favorites, but I did like it. Oh, that means last two. This is so exciting. Let's talk about the next ones. The next first bad review is just whack pacing, which I do see where people are coming from. The next review says, this would have been good if it actually focused on the father-daughter relationship between Hazel and Merrick, instead of whatever the hell that was. I understand. Now, this was maybe my more controversial pick, just because it's a newer release, and I am probably the most biased #1 fan of this author, so it comes to no surprise to those who are familiar with me and my channel, but The 13th Child by Aaron A. Craig. Are we surprised? No. At this point, is it really Sam's best of the year if an Aaron A. Craig isn't on the list? I don't know. I really enjoyed this, though, actually. It really worked for me, and this we are following Hazel, who is the 13th child born to her parents. They're kind of living in poverty. It's really hard, and having 13 children is kind of out of the norm. It's really difficult to raise 12 kids, let alone 13, and therefore, the 13th child is often seen as the lucky kid, the one the gods have a little bit more hope with because there's a little bit more magical abilities available with that kid. And so on Hazel's birthday, she is auctioned. No, she is. Gods are basically trying to buy the rights to Hazel so that they can have access to that untapped magic. And so Merrick, Godfather Death, which is the story, the retelling this is based off, Godfather Death is the one who kind of takes claim to Hazel and is like, someday I will take you and we will live happily together. And so Hazel's kind of always been on the outskirt of her family, not only for being the youngest and the 13th child, but also like having Godfather Death kind of say like, hey, you're my kid. And so there's just like a lot going on. Oh, so good. Okay, anyways, Merrick and Hazel eventually reconnect and come together, and Hazel is taught to be a healer who is able to touch somebody and know exactly how to heal them, or if they're kind of a lost cause. Like if they get a concussion and there's no way of going back to how they were before, or if it's just a very fatal illness, she's able to kind of help end things in a more nice way. I suppose. But there's also things going on in the castle with the royal family, and just what's going on there with the king being sick and she having to be like the hope of the kingdom. I understand why people don't love the pacing of this. I devoured every second of it. We're with Hazel from pretty much the day she was born and through her entire life, and so you're packing a lot of years into average size book, 500 something pages maybe. Less than 500 page book. So she's packing a lot of life into a story like this. But I think that the pacing was really good. I really enjoyed seeing the different ways that Hazel was affected by certain choices that had to be made, or just like, the struggle between like duty and wants. I really enjoyed spending time in the castle. The direction of the story is not necessarily super twisty and unsurprising, but at the same time, I didn't expect a lot of the things that were going on, and the way that things played out did take me by surprise. But not in like a jaw-dropping twist like a thriller might have you. But I really enjoyed the ending of this. The way that it played out was beautiful. I really enjoyed the discussion on like living your life to the fullest and just having hope and love be, important to you. I think that this book did really well. This is one of the few books, I think I cried a lot of books this year, but this is one of the books that like really made me like, cry. It was like almost a sob. So yeah, I really cried for this one. I love these characters. I really love the world. I love the gods so much. Like, if Erin A. Craig gave us more just in this world and learning like little snippets of different gods, I would be so into it. Because we see probably 3 gods primarily in this book, but there are said to be hundreds, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I love the gothic vibes. This is marketed as romantasy. It's not. It's fantasy with some romance in it. But if you took the romance out of this book, like, you would have the same book still. So I don't think romantasy is the correct label for it, but I really enjoyed this. I really love Erin A. Craig's writing. I love her atmosphere. I love just the worlds that she plops me into. So my biased review, I love this, and I don't know what else we would ever expect from me. Okay, and then we move on to the very last, which, I would say that, like, my second and first place can be changed at any point. I'm not sure if the 13th Child is just like, I've read it most recently and that's why it could be the first, but I want to say that this one is number 1. And we've got the first 1-star rating saying, this was unfortunately boring. It peaks at the opening line, which is ouch. And then the next one is just, this did not hold my attention. I had a hard time picking out funny, easy, short 1-star reviews for this book. Mostly because a lot of people are discussing the religion behind it, the, like, way that things were portrayed, and I don't know a lot about history. I'm gonna be really honest. I don't know anything about, like, the Hindu religion history, so I didn't see problematic things reading this book, but I also went into this knowing it's fiction and taking it as fiction and not, like, truth. And so I can't speak on, like, the people having objections to this. They're valid for their thoughts and opinions. I will someday educate myself. I didn't read 1-star reviews until today, so I was not educated until today. But Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. This is a mythology retelling. This is a... how do I explain this? Similar to the 13th Child, you are seeing years pass by. So we are with Kaikeyi for years, and we're seeing her from childhood to adulthood and the life that she lives. She is chosen to be one of the wives for a king, and she has kids, but because there's like sister wives things going on, like, they all kind of take care of all of the kids together as parents. So although she has a son who has been touched by the gods, similar to Kaikeyi, she's also, in a way, touched by the gods. She has magical powers and abilities, but the gods also, like, kind of, like, out of sight, out of mind her, and ignore her a lot. So this has a lot of, like, meddling gods, which is one of my favorite tropes of the year. Spoiler alert. And so it has meddling god. I really thought the magic system was cool and unique. I was really moved and touched by this family. I think I read this in, like, a couple of sittings and was sobbing by the end. Like, this book had me crying. And I think that's one of the reasons why, I obviously enjoyed it, because I had an emotional connection to these characters, which I didn't expect to have. I honestly went into this, like, I got this from Book of the Month. I put it off for a really long time. It came out in April of 2022. Put it off for a while, didn't really feel any certain type of way about it, and then decided to finally pick it up. I had the audiobook, and I loved it so much. It just really touched me in ways that I don't know why. I don't have kids, so I can't relate to, like, motherhood or anything, and I normally don't like stories with a central focus on being a mom or, like, having kids, but for whatever reason, this one was just, like, nice. It was just touching. It was hard. I loved seeing, like, the feminist take on it all, where she's, you know, I really like how she stood up for women. I like how she wasn't afraid of battle and being by her husband's side, and just like everything about this really worked for me. And like my friend Daphne, who is one of my besties, who I love so dearly, has picked this up partly because I cried over it and like have sang its praise so high. And you know, she's not like speeding through the book and she's enjoying it, but she's not like loving it right now, which is so fair and valid. And so like I don't think everyone's going to enjoy this, and that worries me a little bit, because it's like always hard when I'm like, hey everybody, here's my favorite book, and then people are like, are you sure? But it really worked for me. I don't know, something about meddling gods in a book, top tier. Oh my gosh, that's all of them. That's it. We did it. We managed to talk about all of my top 10 books for the year. Again, here are my honorable mentions of just books that worked for me, that I really enjoyed. Some of them are bad books that I loved, like Phantasma. I can see every single one of its flaws. I acknowledge them and I move past them. I love the vibes. So smutty. More smut than I normally want in my books, but the vibes, great. Danny Phantom, love it. There's just some books, you know, that you read and you're like, yeah, it's 5 stars. No, it can't be a favorite, and no, I don't want to like take claim to this being one of the best thing I've ever read. But also, if you ask me 12 friends recommend 12 books, yeah, I'm gonna recommend you Phantasma. So to each their own at the end of the day. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video though. I hope that you guys got a little insight to my year. I will be posting my worst books on Thursday, so stay tuned for that. We will read some 5-star reviews and talk about some of the books that I just didn't work for me, you know, just didn't work for my taste. And then we'll have more end of year content. We'll talk about the book survey tag. We'll have my book awards, where we just name off some of the best outside of just, you know, favorites. I also would love nothing more than to get a physical TBR bookshelf tour video out for you guys. So we'll see if that happens in a timely manner. But alas, I hope you guys are excited for my end of year content, everybody else's end of year content. My watch later right now is flooded with best and worst books of the year. I am embarking on a project of watching as many as I possibly can, but it'll be an interesting time to see what everybody's consider their favorites, especially like seeing Katie Colson, if she decides to do it again, where she compiles all of them and tells us what the best of booktube is. I look forward to seeing what everyone's answers are for this year. But alas, I'm gonna stop yapping. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it to the end of the video, let's put a sun, because yellow and orange, and I don't know if there's like jewelry, so let's just put the sun emoji down in the comments if you made it to the end, and I will see you guys Thursday for my worst of 2024 video. Bye!